Welcome to our channel, where hidden crime stories, untold histories, and true power struggles come to life. Today's story dives into one of the most secretive chapters of American crime history. At the height of his power, Al Capone ruled Chicago, yet he was rarely where people expected him to be. This is the story of Capone's secret safe houses, the hidden places that kept the most wanted man in America one step ahead of the law. A king who never slept in one place. At the peak of the 1920s Prohibition era, Al Capone understood one simple rule of survival. Never stay in one place long enough to be found. Chicago was crawling with enemies, rival gangs, corrupt allies who could turn at any moment, and federal agents desperate to bring him down. Capone didn't rely on luck. He relied on planning, secrecy, and a network of safe houses spread across the city and beyond. These safe houses were not ordinary hideouts. They were carefully selected properties owned under fake names, trusted associates, or shell companies. Some were luxury apartments hidden in plain sight, while others were modest homes that attracted no attention at all. Capone often avoided his own mansion, knowing it was constantly watched. Instead, he moved quietly between locations, sometimes changing sleeping spots several times a week. Only his most trusted inner circle knew where he was staying on any given night. What made these safe houses so effective was how normal they appeared. Neighbors had no idea that one of America's most powerful crime bosses might be sleeping just walls away. No armed guards outside, no flashy cars, just silence. Some locations served specific purposes. One house might be used only for meetings with lieutenants, another for hiding cash and weapons. Others were emergency shelters, places Capone could disappear to if violence broke out or police raids began. The FBI and local law enforcement often raided Capone's known properties, only to find empty rooms and cold beds. By the time agents arrived, Capone was already gone, slipping through the cracks of a system that couldn't keep up with his movement. These secret safe houses became the invisible shield around Capone's empire. They weren't just places to hide, they were tools of power, allowing him to control Chicago while remaining untouchable. And this was only the beginning. The hidden network beneath Chicago. Al Capone's safe houses were not randomly chosen hiding spots. They were part of a carefully designed network, built to confuse rivals, mislead police, and protect the core of his criminal empire. Most people imagine Capone hiding in dark basements or remote cabins. The reality was far more dangerous, and far smarter. Many of Capone's safe houses were located right inside busy Chicago neighborhoods. Apartment buildings near markets, quiet streets close to train lines, and houses surrounded by ordinary families. These locations allowed Capone to blend into daily life. If police were watching wealthy districts, he stayed in working-class areas. If they watched Italian neighborhoods, he moved elsewhere. Capone understood psychology. Law enforcement expected a gangster king to live loudly. So Capone hid quietly. Each safe house had a specific role. Some were transit houses, used only for a few hours while moving between locations. Others were command houses, where Capone met lieutenants, planned operations, and settled disputes. These meetings were short, controlled, and always guarded by men positioned blocks away, never directly outside. One of the most important features of these houses was communication control. Capone never used telephones inside safe houses. Messages were delivered by trusted couriers who memorized instructions and destroyed written notes immediately. Even within his own organization, very few people knew the full list of safe locations. Security inside these houses was subtle but effective. Hidden escape routes were common: back staircases, rear doors leading to alleys, or connecting basements between neighboring buildings. In some locations, Capone could leave from 3 different exits within seconds. Several safe houses also doubled as storage sites. Cash from bootlegging, gambling, and protection rackets was split and hidden across multiple locations. This ensured that even if one house was discovered, the majority of Capone's wealth remained untouched. Police raids often came up empty. Officers would burst into rooms expecting Capone, only to find a few guards or nothing at all. Informants gave tips, but by the time information reached authorities, Capone had already moved. Rival gangs tried to track him as well, and failed just as often. Capone's safe houses created confusion not just for law enforcement, but for enemies looking to assassinate him. They never knew where to strike. Ironically, this constant movement created a myth. People began to believe Capone was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. That illusion of omnipresence strengthened his reputation and weakened his enemies. But no system is perfect. When the net began to tighten, by the late 1920s, Al Capone's safe house network was still strong, but pressure was building. For the first time, federal agents were not chasing Capone directly. They were chasing his patterns. The FBI and Treasury agents realized something critical. Capone did not stay hidden by disappearing, he stayed hidden by moving predictably inside controlled chaos. And predictability, even when subtle, creates cracks. Agents began long-term surveillance, not raids. They watched neighborhoods instead of houses. Street corners, grocery stores, barbershops, and newsstands became intelligence points. Anyone who repeatedly appeared near certain locations, then vanished, was quietly logged. Slowly, a picture began to form. One mistake Capone made was trusting routine. While he never stayed long in one place, he rotated between a limited number of trusted zones. Federal agents noticed that certain buildings would suddenly become quiet whenever Capone arrived. Deliveries stopped, strangers appeared, curtains stayed closed. Another weakness was human loyalty. Capone relied on a small circle of drivers, bodyguards, and couriers. These men were loyal, but they were also human. Some drank too much, some talked too freely, others were followed without realizing it. Agents didn't need Capone himself. They only needed to trail the people who never stayed far from him. The biggest breakthrough came from financial movement. Safe houses weren't just hiding places, they were money nodes. When large sums of cash were moved, patterns appeared. Bribes were paid, rent was handled quietly, utilities were kept under false names, but payments still left trails. Treasury agents began connecting these dots. Still, Capone remained just out of reach. Several raids nearly exposed him. In one case, agents stormed a suspected safe house less than 30 minutes after Capone had left. Food was still warm, cigarettes were still burning, the bed hadn't cooled. Capone knew something was changing. His movements became more aggressive. He stayed fewer hours in each location. He began sleeping in places never used twice. This constant displacement protected him, but it also exhausted his inner circle. Mistakes increased. Delays happened. Messages were misdelivered. Most importantly, Capone underestimated one thing: the federal government's patience. Local police wanted arrests. Federal agents wanted proof. While Capone was busy avoiding bullets and raids, the government was quietly building cases, not about murder, not about bootlegging, but about control, money, and paperwork. The safe houses were still working, but they were no longer invisible. Why the safe houses couldn't save him? Al Capone's network of secret safe houses was brilliant, but it was designed to protect him from violence, not from the system. That difference is what ultimately destroyed him. By the early 1930s, Capone was still physically untouchable. No rival gang could reach him. No witness could place him at a crime scene. No police raid ever caught him sleeping inside a safe house. From the outside, his hiding system looked flawless. But the federal government had changed the game. Instead of chasing Capone's body, they targeted his empire's skeleton: money, records, and control. Safe houses created one fatal problem: they required maintenance. Rent had to be paid. Staff had to be fed. Guards had to be rotated. Vehicles had to be fueled. Cash had to move constantly to keep everything running. Every movement created a small trace, and thousands of small traces add up. Capone believed secrecy was enough. The government believed time was enough. Treasury agents didn't need to know where Capone slept. They needed to know how his money moved. They reconstructed his income using witnesses, bank records, and testimony from people who were never inside a safe house: accountants, clerks, suppliers, and former associates looking for lighter sentences. Safe houses also isolated Capone. As pressure increased, Capone trusted fewer people. Decisions slowed, messages were delayed, orders were misunderstood. While he was hiding more, his lieutenants were acting more independently, and sometimes carelessly. The empire began leaking from the inside. Another critical mistake was overconfidence. Capone believed that because no one could arrest him directly, he was winning. He continued living large when visible: expensive suits, public appearances, interviews, charity events. The contrast was obvious: a man with no legal income living like royalty. That image became evidence. When the government finally moved, they didn't raid a safe house. They didn't arrest Capone with a gun in his hand. They didn't need informants from inside his inner circle. They charged him with tax evasion. Every safe house he ever used became irrelevant in that moment. The walls that hid him couldn't protect him from paperwork. The roots that saved him from ambushes couldn't hide financial math. The secrecy that kept him alive couldn't erase numbers. Capone's arrest shocked the underworld, not because it happened, but because of how simple it was. His safe houses had worked perfectly. They just weren't built to fight the one enemy he underestimated, the federal system itself. The fall, the prison, and the legacy that refused to die. Al Capone was finally convicted in 1931. Not for murder, not for running Chicago's most violent criminal empire, not for ordering executions or controlling the city's underworld. He was convicted for tax evasion. It was the most ironic ending imaginable for a man who survived gang wars, assassination attempts, and decades of police pressure. Capone was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, fined heavily, and ordered to pay back taxes. For the first time in his adult life, the most powerful gangster in America lost control of his surroundings. At first, Capone believed prison would be temporary, another obstacle he could manage. He was wrong. From power to isolation, Capone was initially sent to the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. Even there, his reputation followed him. Guards respected him, inmates feared him, messages still moved quietly, influence still existed. The government noticed. In 1934, Capone was transferred to Alcatraz, a prison designed specifically to break influence, not bodies. Alcatraz destroyed everything Capone depended on. No private conversations, no loyal guards, no bribery, no outside communication, no control. For the first time, Al Capone was just prisoner no. 85. No safe houses, no escape routes, no loyalists waiting outside. The silent collapse. While Capone sat behind bars, his empire collapsed completely. Without his leadership, rival gangs took territory. Former allies turned on each other. Money disappeared. Businesses were seized or shut down. The Chicago outfit survived, but Capone's personal power was gone forever. Worse than prison was his health. Capone suffered from untreated syphilis, which slowly destroyed his mind. His memory faded. His focus disappeared. The man who once controlled a city began forgetting basic details of his own life. By the time he was released in 1939, Capone was no longer dangerous, or even fully aware. He retired to his estate in Florida, far from Chicago, far from power, far from relevance. The death of the man, not the myth. Al Capone died in 1947 at the age of 48. No shootout, no revenge killing, no dramatic ending, just a quiet death caused by complications of illness. But while the man died quietly, the legend did not. Capone became the blueprint for modern organized crime. How to control territory, how to use fear strategically, how to blend public image with criminal power, how secrecy and visibility can coexist. Law enforcement also learned from Capone that financial records matter more than witnesses, that long-term pressure beats brute force, that no criminal is untouchable forever. Why Capone still matters today. Al Capone wasn't just a gangster, he was a lesson. He proved that power built on fear can rise fast, but it collapses slowly and completely. He showed that hiding can protect you from enemies, but not from systems designed to wait. And he reminded the world that the smallest mistake can destroy the largest empire. His safe houses saved his life many times. They just couldn't save his future. That is why, nearly a century later, Al Capone's story is still told, not as a victory, but as a warning. End of story.